fire. The atoms like each other
The atoms like each other,
in the different degrees.
the different degrees.
Oxygen, for instance, in the air,
Oxygen, for instance, in the air,
would like to be next to carbon,
would like to be next to carbon,
and if they're
and if they're
getting near each other,
getting near each other,
they snap together.
they snap together.
If they're not too close, though,
If they're not too close, though,
they repel and they go apart.
they repel and they go apart.
So they don't know
So they don't know
that they could snap together.
that they could snap together.
It's just as if you had a ball
It's just as if you had a ball that
that was trying to climb a hill,
was trying to climb a hill,
and there was a hole
and there was a hole
it could go into,
it could go into,
like a volcano hole,
like a volcano hole,
a deep one.
a deep one.
It's rolling along.
It's rolling along. It
It doesn't go down in the deep hole
doesn't go down in the deep hole,
because it starts to climb the hill
because if it starts to climb the hill
and then rolls away again.
and then rolls away again.
But if you made it
But if you made it
go fast enough,
go fast enough,
it'll fall into the hole.
it'll fall into the hole.
And so, if it's have
And so if it's have
something like wood in oxygen,
something like wood in oxygen,
there's carbon in the wood from a tree,
there's carbon in the wood from a tree,
and the oxygen comes and hits in carbon,
and the oxygen comes and hits it, carbon,
but not hot enough.
but not hot enough.
It just goes away again.
It just goes away again.
The air is always coming.
The air is always coming.
Nothing's happening.
Nothing's happening.
If you can get it faster
If you can get it faster
by heating it up somehow, somewhere,
by heating it up somehow, somewhere,
somehow get it started,
somehow, get it started.
a few of them come fast.
Few of them come fast.
They go over the top, so to speak.
They go over the top, so to speak.
They come close enough to the carbon
They come close enough to the carbon
and snap in.
and snap in.
And that gives a lot of jiggly motion,
And that gives a lot of jiggly motion,
which might hit some other items,
which might hit some other atoms,
making those go faster,
making those go fast.
so they can climb up
So they can climb up
and bump against other carbon atoms,
and bump against other carbon atoms,
and they jiggle,
and they jiggle,
and they make others jiggle,
and they make mothers jiggle,
and you get an horrible catastrophe,
and you get a terrible catastrophe,
which is one after the other.
which is one after the other.
All these things
All these things
are going faster and faster,
are going faster and faster
and snapping in,
and snapping in,
and the whole thing is changing.
and the whole thing is changing.
That catastrophe is a fire.
That catastrophe is a fire.
It's just a way of looking at it.
It's just a way of looking at it.
And these things are happening.
And these things are happening.
They perpetual.
They perpetual.
Once it gets started,
Once it gets started,
it keeps on going.
it keeps on going.
The heat makes
And the heat makes
the other atoms capable of reaching
the other atoms capable of reaching
to make more heat,
to make more heat,
to make other atoms, and so on.
to make other atoms, and so on.
And so, all this terrible snapping
So this terrible snapping
is producing a lot of jiggling.
is producing a lot of jiggling.
And if I put
And if I put
with all lack activity of the atoms there,
with all that activity of the atoms there,
and I put a cup
and I put a cup
of coffee over that mess of wood,
of coffee over that mess of wood
that's doing this,
that's doing this,
it's going
it's going
to get a lot of jiggling.
to get a lot of jiggling.
So that's
So
what the heat of the fire is.
that's what the heat of the fire is.
And then, of course,
And then, of course,
if you see what's happening
if you see, this is what happens
when you start thinking,
when you start to thinking.
just go on and on.
Just go on and on.
Wonder where,
Wonder where.
how did it get started?
How did it get started?
Why is it that the woods
Why is it that the wood's
been sitting around
been sitting around
all this time
all this time
with the oxygen all this time,
with the oxygen all this time?
and it didn't do this earlier
And it didn't do this earlier
or something?
or something.
Where did I get this from?
And where did I get this from?
Well, it came from a tree,
Well, it came from a tree.
and the substance of a tree is carbon.
And the substance of a tree is carbon.
Where did that come from?
Where did that come from?
That comes from the air.
That comes from the air.
It's carbon dioxide from the air.
It's carbon dioxide from the air.
People look at trees and they think
People look at trees and they think
it comes out of the ground.
it comes out of the ground.
The plants grow out of the ground.
The plants grow out of the ground.
But if you ask
But if you ask
where the substance comes from,
where the substance comes from,
you find out.
you find out
Where do they come from?
where do they come from.
The trees come out of the air.
The trees come out of the air.
They surely come out of,
They surely come out of the air. No,
they come out of the air.
they come out of the air.
The carbon dioxide in the air
The carbon dioxide in the air
goes into the tree,
goes into the tree
and it changes it,
and it changes it,
kicking out the oxygen
kicking out the oxygen
and pushing the oxygen away
and pushing the oxygen away
from the carbon
from the carbon
and leaving the carbon substance with water.
and leaving the carbon substance with water.
Water comes out of the ground. You see,
Water comes out of the ground, you see.
only it had to get in there.
Only it had to get in there.
It came out of the air, didn't it?
It came out of the air, didn't it?
It came down from the sky.
It came down from the sky.
So, in fact, most of a tree,
So in fact, most of a tree,
almost all of the tree,
almost all of the tree
is out of the ground.
is out of the ground.
I'm sorry. It's out of the air.
I'm sorry, it's out of the air.
There's a little bit
There's a little bit
from the ground, some minerals,
from the ground, some minerals
and so forth.
and so forth.
Now, of course, I told you
Now, of course, I told you
that oxygen and carbon
the oxygen and carbon
stick together very tight.
stick together very tight.
How is
How is
that the tree is so smart
it the tree is so smart
to take the carbon dioxide,
to take the carbon dioxide,
which is carbon and oxygen,
which is the carbon oxygen,
nicely combined,
nicely combined,
and undo that so easy?
and undo that so easy?
Ah, life.
Ah, life.
Life has some mysterious force.
Life has some mysterious force.
No. The sun is shining,
No, the sun is shining,
and this sunlight comes down
and it's the sunlight that comes down
and knocks this oxygen
and knocks this oxygen
away from the carbon.
away from the carbon.
So it takes sunlight
So it takes sunlight
to get the plant to work.
to get the plant to work.
And so the sun all the time is
And so the sun all the time is
doing the work
doing the work
of separating the oxygen away
of separating the oxygen away
from the carbon.
from the carbon.
The oxygen is some kind of
The oxygen is some kind of
terrible byproduct,
terrible byproduct,
which it spits back into the air
which it spits back into the air
and leaving the carbon
and leaving the carbon
and water and stuff
and water and stuff
to make the substance of the tree.
to make the substance of the tree.
And then we take
Then when we take
the substance of the tree
the substance of the tree
and stick it in the fireplace,
and stick it in the fireplace,
and there's all the oxygen
there's all the oxygen
made by these trees
made by these trees,
and all the carbon
and all the carbon
would much prefer
would much prefer
to be close together again.
to be close together again.
And once you let the heat
And once you let the heat
to get it started,
to get it started,
it continues and makes
it continues and makes
some more the activity
an awful activity
while it's going back together again.
while it's going back together again.
And all those nice light
And all this nice light
and everything comes out,
and everything comes out.
and everything is being undone.
And everything is being undone.
You're going back
You're going back
from carbon and oxygen
from carbon and oxygen
back to carbon dioxide,
back to carbon dioxide.
and the light and heat
And the light and heat
that's coming out,
that's coming out,
that's the light and heat of the sun
that's the light and heat of the sun
that went in.
that went in.
So it's sort of stored sun
So it's sort of stored sun
that's coming out
that's coming out
when you burned a log.
when you burn it, a log.
Next question.
Next question.
How is that the sun
How is it the sun
is so jiggly, so hot?
is so jiggly, so hot?
I gotta stop somewhere.
I gotta stop somewhere.
I leave you something to imagine.
I'll leave you something to imagine.